Cool. So hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. In this webinar, we'll simply do an exploration between Cypress and Selenium, which is arguably two of the most popular testing frameworks at the moment. Like Brooke said, I am Marie, so I currently work as a principal test automation engineer at News UK. I also blog at mariedrake.com about testing and test automation in general. So if you want to visit that, I've added the link here on this icon. If you need to ask me any sort of follow-up questions, I have my Twitter handle added here as well. I'm just going to hand over now to Gary so he can also introduce himself.
Thanks, Mary. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Giridhar Rajkumar. I'm a test automation consultant, having over 11 years of experience in software industry as a tester, as well as a passionate developer. So I'm a blogger, and I have my own blog called learndevdesktops.com, where I publish all my articles and handbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and also get connected via LinkedIn. So I'm very excited to be part of this webinar where I'm going to talk about two of my favorite test automation tools. In fact, before we start, I would like to express that I and Mary wanted to share our personal experiences with these two magnificent tools through this webinar. With that said, I will hand it over to Mary for now to kickstart the session. Over to you, Mary.
Cool. Thanks, Gary. Cool. So just a quick agenda for today. First, we'll look at what Selenium is, followed by doing some Cypress introduction, and then we'll look at some architecture differences between these two tools, and then we'll do a test walkthrough on how we can automate some tests using Selenium compared to Cypress. Giri will then walk you through as to what the feature differences are between Selenium and Cypress. And then at the end, we'll have some time for some questions. Cool. So first and foremost, what is Selenium? So Selenium is just a tool that is mainly used for automating the browsers. The idea behind Selenium, it was created to address the inefficiency of running manual test cases again and again. For those of you who don't know, Selenium is actually a combination of these multiple tools. So first, we have the Selenium WebDriver, which is arguably one of the most popular like Selenium frameworks out there. It supports almost all programming languages, which gives developers and QA engineers the flexibility that they need to automate the tests in their programming language of choice. We also have Selenium IDE, which is a browser extension that lets you automate simple test cases using record and playback. And then we also have the Selenium Grid, which is a tool that allows you to run your automated tests simultaneously. Now, if we look at Selenium WebDriver's weekly downloads as of when this image was taken, there are over 1.6 million weekly downloads, which shows that Selenium is really popular. Because of its popularity, Selenium WebDriver is recommended by the World Wide Web as a recommended tool. Cool. So just to understand more how Selenium works internally, let's look at its architecture first. So first here we have the different language bindings and support classes. These different language bindings allow you to write Selenium tests to be written in different programming languages. Now the Selenium server, actually, they don't care what programming languages you write your test with. This is where the JSON WAR protocol comes in. So these different language bindings interact with the WebDriver API by using JSON as a medium to communicate to the different browser drivers. The browser driver, on the other hand, helps in communication with the actual browsers. So for example, if you want to automate your tests in the Chrome browser, you would need to make sure that you have the Chrome driver installed so that you can run your test successfully. So on the other hand, let's talk about Cypress. Now, similar with Selenium, Cypress is also a testing tool, which is used for automating functional or end-to-end tests. Now, if you go to their website, the first thing that you see is this message. The web has evolved, finally testing has too. On the upcoming slides, we'll see how easy it is to run your first Cypress test. So Cypress is also currently the second most popular JavaScript testing framework. Based on its weekly download from NPM, it's also more than 1 million already, which goes to show that a lot of developers and QA engineers are also switching to using it. Cool. So just more information as to what Cypress is. So I mentioned that Cypress is essentially a tool which simulates browser actions like a real user. However, it's worth noting here as well that you can also use Cypress for testing your API integration. It provides an easy way for developers and QA engineers to write easier and more user-friendly tests. Brian Mann, who's the creator of Cypress, came up with the idea of Cypress because he realized that existing testing tools for automating the UI are often quite difficult to set up and debug. It is often compared as a great alternative to Selenium, but Cypress is actually built differently from Selenium, which I'll explain on the next slide. Cool. So what I mean by that is if you compare it to the Selenium's architecture, Cypress test runs directly inside your browser without any additional layers in between. This means that you can alter the DOM and even intercept network requests directly without the need of additional layers. Cool. So prior to Cypress, you would need to install separate libraries to write your automated tests. There are also tons of different tools to choose from. So if you're quite new to test automation, you might feel overwhelmed and might be confused as to which tool is the best for you. Now, Cypress takes away all these different complexities, and it just like lets you focus on what provides the most value, which is actually writing the tests. Cool. So now just to demonstrate the setup for these two testing tools. So first, let's look at Selenium. So if you're using the official Selenium WebDriver implementation for JavaScript, so first you would need to install Selenium WebDriver. But then at the same time, if you need to do some assertion, you would need to install Chai. And then for your testing framework, you would have to install Mocha. Now, I mentioned that there is a WebDriver binding that you have to download. So if you're going to automate your test using Chrome, you need to make sure that you have the Chrome driver downloaded, and then you need to set your path environment variable to include the location for this Chrome driver. Now, on the other hand, with Cypress installation, you just need to run one command, which is npm install Cypress, and you should be good to go. Cool. So great. Now it's time to show you a quick demo on how you can write tests using Selenium WebDriver. The link for this public repo is available here, so just feel free to play around with it after this session. But before we start, so I'm just going to give a walkthrough of the application that we're going to try to automate today. So this is just a simple to-do app where you can add a to-do item, and then you can mark it as completed. And then if you click the completed tab here, you can then see which of the to-do items you've marked as completed. Cool. So with Selenium WebDriver, the first thing that you have to do is to import the appropriate objects that you need from Selenium WebDriver and also from Chai. On our before each hook here, so we're just initializing the driver object here so that it will run on the Chrome browser. We're navigating to this URL that I've showed a while ago. And then here, we just have two test selectors that we need to use to interact to our application. And then here, we're just, finding the element and we're just typing, this text and hitting the enter so that we can add those to-do items. So one thing that you might notice here is we're using the async and await keyword on each of the different commands. Now, this is very important because we want to make sure that this command here will finish before we move on to the next command, so we don't have any errors in our test. Cool. So for our first test, we're just verifying that when the to-do list element is located, we just want to verify that the length of that element is equivalent to 2 because we've added 2 items. And here on our next test, we just want to write a simple test to mark a to-do item as completed. So here we're basically clicking on the first toggle button, and then we're clicking on the completed button. And then we're just verifying that the first element on the completed button is equivalent to what we're expecting. And then finally, after you run your test, you need to make sure that you quit the driver so that there's no floating driver instances around. Cool. So this is just a video recording here to show you how you can run your test with Selenium. So I'm just using a command called npm test, and here you can see that okay, your application is loading, but it's very fast. You can see as well that your tests are passing. But what if you want to actually debug your application real time while you're also writing the test? So before I answer that, I'm just gonna quickly show you how you can write the same test using Cypress. Cool. Again, the GitHub repo is here. It's public, so feel free to clone it after this session. Cool. So in Cypress, the first thing that you do, this is optional, but I highly recommend that you do this, is to add the Cypress reference type. Now, what this does is, if you're using like VS Code editor, it will automatically import all the different commands that you can do with Cypress. So it just makes it handy, and it will speed up the way that you write your tests. Cool. So similarly, we have a before each hook here. The first thing that you might notice is we're not using async and await keyword anymore. Cypress will automatically handle all the different asynchronous events. So all we need to do is just call the different commands. So the first command that we're doing is we're doing a site.visit on our application. We're using a feature here called alias. So in this case, we want to get the new to-do item and we want to call it the add to do. And then here we have the same test from a while ago where we're just basically adding 2 items in our to-do app. Cool. So how does our first test looks like? So we just want to basically test that the list elements of the to-do list is equivalent to 2. And then here to mark a to-do item as completed. So again, we want to get the toggle button, but we want to click the first one. And here we just want to check that, okay, if we find the text that's equivalent to completed, we just want to click that. And this one, this is just a custom command that you can use. Basically, what this custom command is doing is it's just getting the first to-do item. And then here we're just doing an assertion that it should be equivalent to what we are expecting. Cool. So again, just to show you how we can run this test on our terminal. So yay, tests are passing. But then again, there's no visual demonstration on how our application looks like. Now, this is where the Cypress Test Runner comes in. So Cypress has this unique offering where you can see your tests being run interactively. So as you can see, whenever your tests are running, you also have a live preview of your application. Every time you click or hover on any of the commands here, the test runner will automatically replay the state of your application. You can click before and after to see what your application would look like before and after doing an action. And if you notice here, you also have access to DevTools console. So it makes debugging so much easier. Another thing to note is that whenever you make changes to any of your Cypress tests, the Cypress test runner will automatically check for any file changes, and then it will run your tests. So you don't have to keep on like running the same command. You can just leave the Cypress test runner open, and then whenever you make some code changes, your test will automatically run, which is very great. Cool. So now I will hand over to Giri so that he can talk about the feature comparisons in depth between these two different tools.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary, for your wonderful explanation about the architectural differences between Selenium and Cypress, in fact, and also for giving us a wonderful demo about these two tools. Having said this, I'll just get into the comparisons. So basically speaking, this is how I compare Selenium and Cypress from a personal experience perspective. So basically speaking, like Mary said, both are having two different architectures. So basically Selenium is having a different JSON wire protocol architecture, whereas Cypress has a different architecture actually. But also we need to understand that the primary audience for both the tools are totally different. So basically from Selenium perspective, the primary focus is from testers point of view. Whereas if you take Cypress, it's more or less focused from a developer, front-end developers point of view. But again, with the features that Cypress offers us, it doesn't mean that it is restricted only to developers, but it can be extended to testers too, provided if we know the limitations of that particular tool, in fact, right? So having said this, we will just get into the core comparison between these two tools. So this is how I have designed this particular comparison. So we will see about a couple of core comparisons, and then we will see how Selenium is giving more advantage than Cypress, and then we will just see how Cypress is giving more advantage than Selenium actually. So first thing first is the programming language. I just saw a question from one of our fellows in the question and answer session. So basically speaking, Selenium does support many languages like Java, C#, JavaScript, Ruby, Python, etc., which is absolutely great for any enterprise applications that are being developed with these programming languages as the front end programming language. But again, if you take Cypress, it supports only JavaScript. The reason behind that one, like I said earlier, it is much focused from the front-end developers perspective. The reason behind that one is like Cypress is meant to do the end-to-end testing for modern web applications, which means modern web technologies like React.js, AngularJS, etc., are completely based out of JavaScript, right? So that's the reason why Cypress is supporting more from a front-end developers programming language perspective, where we can just go with the end-to-end testing strategy there. So the other core comparison, what I personally see as a test automation consultant, is the support for multiple browsers. So like you see here, Selenium supports n number of browsers, which is absolutely great. Also, Cypress supports the same set of browsers, except a few browsers like Safari, Opera, and Internet Explorer. But again, if you see from the Cypress perspective, there are almost like 11 types of browsers that are available. I'll come to that in a minute. But if you see the Selenium, the versions of the browsers, what we see here, or what we use as part of our regular testing activities, are more from the production perspective. Like we use the production releases of these browsers. But if you take Cypress, it supports cross-browser now, thanks to the version 4.x, where we can just execute our test cases across Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. The reason why Cypress supports other browsers like Chromium, Beta, Canary, and Div browser versions is something like thinking a bit advanced. So say, for example, from the business perspective, you're developing an application. And that application, we need to check whether it is going to support the next version of, say, for example, Edge. Right? So we need to see whether it is going to support the next version of Edge, which means before we push our application to the production, we need to make sure that it supports the beta version of the next, a beta version of that particular browser. So that's where Cypress is very developer friendly. where they can try to execute all the test cases across different beta versions of browsers as well, right? So if you're using version 3.x of Cypress, I don't think so that it supports multiple browsers. You need to upgrade it to 4.x, so please keep that in mind. And now let's get into the plus points what Selenium gives us actually. So basically speaking, we are going to see what are the advantages of using Selenium over Cypress. So first thing first, since it supports multiple languages, it needs to support multiple testing frameworks as well, like TestNG, JUnit, NUnit, XUnit, in fact, Cucumber and Mocha. Thank you, Mary. So yeah, so it has, so basically speaking, these are the test frameworks that, Selenium supports, whereas if you take Cypress, as of now, it supports only Mocha. And I also answered a question from the Q&A, why only Mocha? So basically speaking, again, it's front end. So we want, it's meant for front end developers, and we just wanted to make sure that all the tests are written in a simple way. And that's where, Cypress stands, front. And when it comes to the remote execution, Selenium is the king of the hill, whereas Cypress doesn't support any remote execution as of now. And if you take the multiple tags and cross-domain testing, Selenium is wonderful. So what I mean by cross-domain testing is, say for example, like you wanted to switch between one domain to another domain. Say for example, google.com to I would say that parabank.com. So the domains of these two applications are totally different. So what happens is that particular support in Cypress is not so great. We just have to restrict within one domain. Whereas if you take Selenium, it executes across any domains that are available. And the next one is Selenium has an excellent support for cloud-based cross-browser testing tools like Browser Stack, Sauce Labs, etc. So if you have an application that has to be executed with different versions of Internet Explorer or Chrome browsers, or all those kind of browsers, you can just use Browser Stack or Sauce Labs kind of things. Whereas currently, I don't think so that it's there in the roadmap as well. I'm not very sure about it. I'm not sure whether Cypress is going to support cross-browser testing tools as of now. But if you take the Selenium side, it has an excellent support from the mobile testing perspective. Of course, Selenium and Cypress are meant, when it is compared here, it is meant only for web applications. But I just wanted to bring a note here for you guys to understand. So basically, Selenium supports mobile testing as well, so native mobile testing using tools like APM. But Cypress doesn't support mobile testing because it's completely web-based. It focuses more from web applications perspective. And but if you have an application that has viewport testing, you can just use Cypress as well because it's having an excellent support for viewport. And from the Selenium perspective, it has an excellent community support because of its legacy. I've been using Selenium for past 8 years now, and I'm sure that Selenium is there for past a decade. So that's the reason why it is having an excellent community support. Whereas if you take Cypress, it is an evolving community support. It's been there in the market for just three years, and we are having an evolving community support as of now. And the next one is something we are going to compare. Maybe I just want to, okay. Yeah. So now let's compare Cypress with Selenium. What are the plus points that are there with Cypress when compared to Selenium? First one, it's absolutely fast. It is fast when compared to Selenium for the execution. The reason behind why Selenium is a bit slower is because of its JSON wire protocol. Like what Mary said, there is a middle layer that consumes the code and then executes within the browser. And the second part is no driver dependency. The main advantage of using Cypress against the Selenium is there is no driver defined as such. So say, for example, there is one big flakiness within Selenium that I have observed personally, like having different versions of WebDriver for different browser versions. Say, for example, if I have a Chrome driver, if I have a Chrome browser, and if it gets auto updated, what happens all of a sudden is like there might be a situation that your WebDriver version will not support the updated version. So in that case, what happens is you'll be thrown an exception saying that there is a mismatch found, so you need to upgrade the WebDriver version. So that kind of hassleness is not there in Cypress. And the other important advantage of using Cypress here is for developers. It has a built-in mock server, and it has spice and clocks as well. And when it comes to Selenium, it doesn't have any mocking support as of now, which is out of the box. But again, you can use external tools to do this particular mocking, like mock server, etc. And the another advantage of using Cypress is the XHR validation support. In fact, if your application is very modern and if you have support for XHR validation, Cypress is really good to use when compared to Selenium. Of course, Selenium, it is possible, but you have to use third-party tools. And the other one is the Cypress test runner, which I feel it's absolutely great. The reason behind that one is being a tester, being an automation tester. I used to interact with many business testers who are there, who are non-technical as well. So basically speaking, those guys will not be having any technical knowledge about coding. So what I need to do is I just have to hand over them the code and tell them that, guys, execute these tests using this particular test runner. Whereas if you take Selenium, the main problem is like it has Selenium ID, which is record and playback, absolutely great. But it is not as good as Cypress, like I said, from the test runner perspective. The reason behind that one is the business testers has to set up everything in their machine, right from the IDE, what we are trying to execute, say, for example, Eclipse or Visual Studio or whatever, IDE it is, where we are trying to write the Selenium code, and then only they will be able to execute it. Whereas if you take Cypress, they don't have to worry about anything as such. All they need to do is like use Cypress test runner and start executing the test cases from there. And the next one is about the API testing support. I really like this particular feature in Cypress, actually, because it is an end-to-end testing tool, right? It has great support for almost all the layers of the automation pyramid, where it supports API testing as well, where developers really appreciate it using within Cypress, rather not going with any other external third-party tools. And when it comes to Selenium, as of now, probably it doesn't support API testing. Since it is just a browser automation tools. And the other great advantage of using Cypress is automatic retries, guys. I really appreciate that particular feature here. So when it comes to Selenium, we have to explicitly tell what is the time it has to wait, or we just have to put implicit waits and explicit waits like thread.sleep or as such to just wait for that particular element to load, and then it executes the next consequent line of code, right? But if you take Cypress, we don't have to explicitly tell that, okay, wait for this much time or wait till, this timeout happens. You don't have to worry about it because Cypress has an automatic retries where you can execute all the test cases without any hassle, which brings the non-flakiness within the test case execution, actually. So that's why Cypress claims that they are less flaky when compared to other tools that are there in the market. And the other one is the automatic screenshots and videos capturing. I know that many people appreciate taking the screenshots and videos when test cases are getting executed. If you take Selenium, we need to manually configure it, like when you have to take the screenshots, whether it is failure or you have to put it in the catch block or something like that, and you have to use third-party libraries to start recording the particular video when it is getting executed in the pipelines. But if you take Cypress, you don't have to worry about it because it has automatic screenshots and videos feature, and you can configure it by toggling it off as well from the config file perspective. And like Mary said, it is quite easy to install with one command, like npm install Cypress. But if you take Selenium, since it is having multiple components, right? We are just trying to tailor multiple components for Selenium. So that's the reason why we need to use multiple commands and multiple line of codes to stitch that particular framework. Whereas in Cypress, it's quite easy to do that. And the other important feature as a developer, what I appreciate is clear error messages, actually. So when it comes to Selenium, we are getting error messages which are absolutely great. But at the same time, it is a little bit confusing as well, which gives us, messages with long stack trace with the errors where we will not be able to understand many things. Whereas if you take Cypress, it's quite clear. We will just see a small example as well in the consequent slides. And the other one is when it comes to the documentation perspective, I personally feel that Cypress is having an excellent documentation. Though Selenium has excellent community support, Cypress has excellent documentation. But Selenium as of now has only average documentation since it is completely community based actually. So with these differences, I'll just show a simple example of how test runner is going to help us out in drafting the test cases very quickly actually. So when Mary was running the test runner, when Mary was executing the test cases through test runner, she just executed it by clicking on the left hand side where test cases gets executed. But there is one another feature which I really like with Cypress is Selector Playground actually. So what is it? Selector Playground is something like you can select the jQuery path of this particular component directly from the test runner itself. So I'm just going to play this video so that you will be able to see that how easy from Cypress it is to take the locator and place it in the code and execute the test case actually. So I'm just playing it. So I'm just copying the code and I'm just going to Visual Studio and I'm just pasting it over here. So that is the new to-do locator and I'm just going to type it. I'm just going to add hello world 2. So like we saw in the previous demo where Mary was taking, it just executes on its own, right? The moment we save the code, it executes on its own. So that's what happened now. So if you see here, we will be able to see hello world 2. That is because that I just saved the code over there in Visual Studio and it automatically executed here without me executing the test case manually. So that is one feature that I really like it. And the other one is regarding the clear messages, which I was talking about, right? So let's take an example of the to-do list application itself. So for this particular example sake, we have just renamed this particular field. So we just removed a dot here. So when we executed our Selenium tests, it was throwing this kind of an error, which is not, I somewhat feel that it is not tester friendly or, so I need to just go and see what is that exception that is being thrown and everything. Whereas if you take Cypress, it just shows clearly what is that particular error is all about. This is just a simple example. But if you consider a major business applications or an enterprise applications, you will be able to understand usage of Cypress error messages, where it shows very clearly about what is a particular failure is all about, right? And the other one is the support for XHR validation. So this is a simple example from Cypress perspective. So all we need to do is like use fixtures where we just have to give the mock data, where it's again a JSON file from Cypress perspective, where we just publish all our data, which has to be mocked. And to invoke that particular server, we just have to use cy.server and route it to that particular URL with the test data or the data that has to be displayed here, and you can asset it using chai as well over here. So this is how we do XHR validation in a simple way using Cypress. But again, if you take Selenium, it supports XHR like I said earlier, but again through third-party libraries like browser mock proxy, which is a little bit tedious, but again it is achievable. You would just have to have more technical knowledge to do with Selenium using browser mock proxy. So now that we have seen the core differences between Selenium and Cypress, we will just see what are all the common things that are there between these two magnificent tools actually. So both Cypress and Selenium are browser automation tools. Of course, yes, we all agree with that. And both the tools are open sourced, but Cypress has a commercial dashboard alone. But the usage of Cypress is completely open source. You can just start, pulling it and start using it. So you don't have to worry about using Cypress. Again, the commercial dashboard is optional. If you want, you can use it. Else, you can just live with the open source version of Cypress itself. And the reporting is highly customizable with these two tools. So since Selenium supports multiple reporting tools like extent reports, allure reports, etc., you can just try to use that particular reporting tools over there. When you take Cypress, it supports Mocha's inbuilt reporting, which is absolutely great. You can just customize it as well, and you can use Mocha Sum as well, which I personally use it in my projects as well. And both are having excellent CI/CD pipeline support actually. So you can use Cypress within a CI/CD environment using Jenkins or Circle CI or Travis CI, whatever it is, it supports seamlessly. And last but not the least, the parallel execution. So both the tools supports parallel execution of executing the test cases in parallel, which eventually saves more time. So with my personal experience, what I have seen is like using the parallel execution methodology, Cypress saves more time when compared to Selenium, in fact. So with these said, I believe that you'll be able to identify the differences between these two tools. And it's up to you guys to decide which tool offers you the best usage of your requirement. And with this said, we are open for questions now.
Yes, yeah, we should have plenty of time. So you can see where to access the Q&A. Is that, can you and Murray see that? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes,
okay.
Right, yeah.
Perfect. So then let's just start at the top and work our way down.
We'll start from the top, actually.
Okay.
Cool. So I'll read the first question. So will this recording of webinar be shared after, Brooke?
The what? Sorry?
Will the recording of this webinar be shared after?
Yes, yeah, this will all be part of the recording.
Cool. Okay. Instead of Mocha or Chai, can I use Jasmine with Cypress? As of now, no. So Cypress supports only Mocha at the moment. Cool. Selenium uses Chrome. Yeah, Mary, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this one, Selenium uses Chrome driver to connect to Chrome and similar drivers to each browser. How does Cypress handle that connection, or is that the same drivers under the hood? So if you refer back to the architecture, with Cypress, there's no middle layer. So your tests don't need to interact with any of these different drivers as opposed with Selenium. So you just really need to run your Cypress test, and you don't have to worry about installing all the similar drivers because it's just running directly on the browser. Yeah. Cool. Do you want to take the next one, Gary?
Yeah, sure. Is the runner an IDE where you develop your tests? No, it is actually. So, oh, that question just vanished.
Yeah,
actually, no, actually, yeah. Actually, no. So basically speaking, we use Visual Studio to write our Cypress tests, and we use Test Runner to execute the test cases.
Cool. Your slides show Selenium doesn't support Chromium or Canary Chrome. Is that accurate? So I know that Selenium runs with the Chrome, but I'm not sure because I haven't personally using Chromium or Canary Chrome with Selenium. Do you have experience with this one, Gary?
No, I haven't used that Canary either.
Cool. We can maybe look at this back, and then we can give much more information. Cool.
Sure,
I
yeah.
feel like Selenium supports all of those things. Yeah, it might do, but then again, I don't have personal experience with running Selenium tests with Chromium or Canary Chrome, so we'll have to look into it. Does any of these frameworks have issues with AOT/JIT? What does this acronym means?
I'm not sure either, Mary. I'm not very sure about it actually.
Cool. Do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah. So, what does test maintenance look like? Most modern frameworks have you writing abstraction for easier page object maintenance. Does Cypress use a recommended pattern like page object pattern or something else? I think Gleb can answer this actually.
Hi everyone. you write your tests in JavaScript, and you can create your own abstraction models on top of a test. If you like page objects, you can write a page object. And so instead of like site get selector click, you can say page object, click on an item. And then inside the click method, you would say site get selector. And so you can abstract access to particular elements. So feel free to do that. Cypress also allows you to have custom commands. So I think Marie showed like site.get to do item, right? Like this command that's not part of Cypress core API, but it's something that she has written in her tests. So it's available in a project. So you can do that as well. Feel free. I personally don't think that page object models are as useful, to be honest, in Cypress. Because of JavaScript and built-in bundler, you can write little helper functions if you need them and just import them directly. You never have to create complex abstractions just for the purpose of the test. So, but you can definitely create one.
Cool. Thanks, Gleb. So from Brendan, what are the third-party tools that can achieve XHR support for Selenium? So as Gary said, you can look into browser mob proxy as an option.
I share learning resources for both Selenium and Cypress. Yes, we will just share it to Broke, and Broke will be sending it. How works well, if possible, the parallel testing on CY? Mary, do you want to answer that because you have good experience with that?
Yeah. So personally, I haven't used the Cypress dashboard because currently at work we just use the open source. But we managed to do some parallel execution with using Circle CI. So what we do is we split the tests in Circle CI and we run it on different containers. So if your CI provider allows you to run your tests on multiple agents, you can achieve that without using the dashboard. But have a look at the Cypress dashboard because it's just basically, it takes all these different complexities from you. So you can just focus on, like writing all these tests like simultaneously. So have a look. I'm not sure if they have a free like trial for the Cypress dashboard, but you can like have a look at it.
Wonderful, thanks, Mary. Can either
Mary,
one be
can I
used?
just add, Gary, before you,
Go ahead, Gleb.
you can try, there is a free trial. You can run up to, I think, 500 individual tests, right, per month and try the dashboard. And you can definitely parallelize yourself. Dashboard just makes it easier, so you don't have to fiddle with config files.
Wonderful. Thanks, Gleb. Thank you so much. So the next question is from Amita. Can either one be used to automate mobile applications? So basically speaking, yes, Selenium supports APM to do the native mobile applications. But again, if your application is going to be responsive and it supports multiple viewport testing, Cypress is a good option to do that because it supports excellent viewport feature where you can just set up the viewport and you can execute the tests just like how we are executing it in your web application with less time actually.
Cool. From Michael, can you explain the CI/CD support for Selenium versus Cypress? So if you're quite familiar with using Docker, Selenium has official Docker images for the Selenium, so you can run your tests on Chrome or on Firefox. On Cypress as well, they have a lot of like different Cypress images that you could use. I believe if you're using Circle CI, you can also use the Cypress orbs, which makes it easier to basically, like run all the different commands without doing like extra installation. So have a look at the official Selenium Docker images, and I'm sure it will be on the Cypress documentation as well on how to use all these different Docker images so you can run it on your CI CD pipeline.
Thanks, Mary. Thank you so much. And the next question is again from Anita. So also will Selenium work on Delphi? I'm not very sure about what does Delphi means here. So I'm not able to answer that.
Cool. From Dallas, for XHR requests, any validation against the JSON schema if we are using an endpoint? So yes, if your application is using XHR, so you can actually debug this with the test runner. So whenever you run the test runner, you can see that on your like site.visit, underneath you'll see like a list of different XHR requests that Cypress like can listen to. If the endpoint that you're trying to test is listed there, then you can do all sorts of validation. You can test on it like real time by using the real endpoint, or as Giri showed on one of the mocking example, you can mock that particular endpoint and like stub it with the data that you wanted to return.
Cool. The next question is, good morning. Do you know if there is a way to use Cypress on an agnostic environment, or if Cypress has plans to do this? That is, test an iOS app as we can do on Eggplant. That is very uncommon and expensive. Gleb, do you want to take it up?
Yes, so right now Cypress is really tied to the browser. It knows how to control the browser. It knows how to launch Firefox or Chrome or Microsoft Edge. It knows how to connect to remote debugger protocol and do the web testing by running inside the browser. We have no idea about iOS or Android. It's completely different beast, so we cannot apply the same thing. The only company that I must suggest that kind of does the same for mobile applications, I believe, is a tool called Detox from Wix. They also load the testing code inside the application, and so they can control it from inside. We have no plans to do that. In fact, I think the web will take over the world, and soon all native mobile applications will be rewritten in something like, I don't know, React Native or something. So we are strong believers in the web technology.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Gleb. Can Cypress handle window dialog boxes? For example, if we try to automate uploading an image. I'd like to say no, but mainly because I haven't automate this particular scenario where I have to upload an image. But Gleb, maybe you can confirm.
Yes, this is the biggest shortcoming of Cypress right now. When you do file upload, file download, these are native browser events. Cypress runs inside the browser, so it usually uses synthetic events, right? JavaScript click, JavaScript type. When you have to do like file upload, it's a native event. Selenium sends a native events through the driver protocol. We are working right now on adding native events through Chrome debugger protocol so that we can send the same event. We just haven't added it yet. People have all sorts of workarounds going around that, but it's not as easy. And I definitely think this is something we will implement, sometime in this year to get all native events in Cypress as well.
Cool. Thank you, Gleb. Thank you so much. Can Cypress or Selenium simulate charge tests? A lot of users doing the same thing at the same time. I'm not very sure what do you mean by charge tests here. It means.
You mean like maybe load testing, where you have multiple users?
Maybe. Gleb, is it load testing is what you understand?
I think this is what they mean, right? A lot of people charging at the same time at the website. We don't have anything out of a box, right? But if you can spin, like Marie said, many containers on your CI, you can execute the same test over and over, and imagine 100 machines loading your website and going through the same end-to-end test, which kind of simulates it. But it's not a specific tool for it, right? So it's hard to say, oh, you're going to hit it at the same time. I think what you are really looking for is a dedicated backend load testing software that actually will test your backend, because your front end is all separate anyway. So going through this full web application might not be, meaningful.
Cool. Next one from Jovan. Is it possible to use Cypress Playground in browsers other than Chrome? So yes, as Giri mentioned, you do have to upgrade to version 4.x. And if you're using the Cypress test runner, you can just easily switch from one browser to another. So there is a drop-down menu at the top right, where if you have, let's say, Firefox installed or Edge beta installed, you can just switch to those different browsers, and then your Cypress test will run in those browsers.
Good. Thanks, Mary. And the other one is from Ivan. We use JMeter for performance and load testing. Does Cypress provide a similar feature? So I'm not very much sure about performance testing using Cypress as such, because Cypress is meant for web applications. So like Gleb said earlier, so you need to make use of other performance tools that are available.
Yeah.
And can we expect Cypress to support languages other than JS in the future? Gleb.
So we already support CoffeeScript. We just released TypeScript support, so you don't have to set up your own transpiler. Ultimately, whatever you write your test will have to run in a browser. And the only language that runs in a browser is JavaScript. There's no VBScript, Flash, nothing. So we don't have many choices, right? But if you have a transpiler that converts, let's say, Java or Python code into JavaScript, you can write your test in Python or Java. But in Cypress, they'll execute as JavaScript. It's just there are no good transpilers. So I would say, like Giri said, there's a benefit in having a single language for your web application, which has to be TypeScript or JavaScript, and your specs, because then you can share code, share knowledge, write tests at the same time. It just becomes easier, right, to write the test in the same language.
Cool.
Wonderful. Thanks, Gleb.
Is it recommended to have Cypress? Where did it go? Oh, it was gone. Okay. So is the Cypress UI that was demonstrated part of the free open source? Yes, the Cypress test runner is completely free.
Cypress has okay, I'll just go for the next one. Cypress has automatic screenshots. Is there a setting that you can be set off how many screenshots will be saved to free up clutter? So I haven't seen it personally, whether we can configure how many screenshots that we can take. Mary, have you seen anything like that where you can restrict? No, I don't think so that we can restrict as such. Yeah, cool. Since Cypress automatically retries to execute the test, is there a setting that tells how many times to retry, actually?
Can I answer that one, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So what the presentation showed was automatic retry for a command inside the test. So imagine you're trying to click on a button. So you say, "Sci, get me selector," and then that click. So that click might not necessarily have a button to click right away, because your application might be redrawing itself. So there is no button. It hasn't appeared yet. It's a dynamic application. So that click automatically will retry sci.get and see if a button appears up to 4 seconds by default, right? So this is what it's meant by automatic retry. It doesn't rerun the whole test. No, it's just every command followed by assertion that can be safely retried, like find me element, right? It will be retried until it times out or is found and assertion passes. So this is built in automatically. We have a plugin that retries the whole test, right? You can use a Cypress plugin retries. We are putting it inside the core of application of Cypress. So you can have a setting for each test or for globally saying, if my test fails, retry it up to 3 times, for example. Because there's Flake, it's a full stack test, right? So it's coming. You can use plugin for now, but it's coming in probably the next couple weeks, the test retries. And it's going to be unbelievable because you have 100 tests. One test is like fails like 1% of the time. You run it and it passes, and it's so frustrating to stop your whole build because of that. We'll have it soon.
Nice one. Looking forward to that. So from Daniel, backend testing possible with Cypress. So if you mean like testing APIs, yes, that's possible with Cypress. If you mean, I guess, like database testing, I'm not sure if Cypress can do that because I haven't tried it personally. But if you just want to test your APIs, then yes, you can definitely use Cypress.
Yeah, perfect. Can we use Jasmine instead of Mocha in Cypress? No, not at the moment, because Mocha is quite, quite good. So that's why Cypress supports it. And the other one is ahead of time or just-in-time compiler.
I think this was the acronym that we asked. Yeah.
Is it? Sorry.
What was the acronym?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Question.
Can you use Cucumber with Cypress? How will it benefit? Yes, Cucumber, my favorite topic actually. So So yeah. So we can use Cucumber with Cypress, and the main way it benefits us is something like it's again an extra layer, just like how it is with Selenium. In fact, it is a wrapper layer of writing your tests or acceptance criteria in simple English way. But what matters is how Cypress is going to help us with the Cucumber execution. It is much faster again. Be it whether if you are using Mocha or Cucumber, it's very impressively fast. When compared to other tools that supports Cucumber.
From Brendan, we have a large base of Selenium tests at our company and are considering starting to move some of our tests over to Cypress. Cool. Then if you guys have experience, how is it? Yeah. So over, I think like on the past like 6 months, we were actually trying to migrate our WebDriver IO test to Cypress. And my suggestion would be to don't do it big bang, like do it like feature by feature. Definitely do it small, and don't just delete your existing Cypress test, your existing like Selenium test, because you still want to make sure that the existing tests they still don't like throw any errors if our developers like push in some new code changes. So I highly recommend to do it like a very basic POC first. Just have a basic Cypress test framework, and then after you've got all the like basic setup, just start to migrate one feature at a time. If you're using CI, then I would suggest to actually do the CI integration at the very beginning. Like, don't just write all the tests and then leave the CI at the bit. So once you have one feature that you have migrated from Selenium to Cypress, the next thing that you want to look at is the CI integration. So that way you can see how your Cypress tests are going to run when it's run on the build pipeline.
And one more
Perfect.
thing I just wanted to add on that particular part is, Brendan, if you really want to know how this migration has to be done, our first meetup webinar is going to happen on that particular topic of migration, where Zing Wang from News UK is going to tell her personal experience of migrating tests. Probably you can register to that particular event and you can just get benefit out of that as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well, we are out of time. That went super fast, but thank you to all three of you, Gleb, Giddy, Marie. We appreciate your time. Excellent information.